Ora, então cá estamos, vamos para a segunda parte do vídeo que tivemos ontem, portanto, falar aqui de um bocado de monitores gaming, monitores topo de gama, e vamos ver os vídeos de alguns. Para quem não esteve no vídeo de ontem, já sabem que tem que ir ao canal ver, ok? Que assim não perdem metade da conversa. Deixem-me colocar aqui isto tudo disponível para as várias plataformas. Sabem, eu faço transmissão para várias plataformas ao mesmo tempo, portanto, quem quiser ver numa ou noutra, fica à vontade, é que lhe der mais gosto. Temos também duas plataformas em stream vertical e o resto é tudo horizontal, que é o normal. Ora bem, então, portanto, ontem comecei aqui por aqui este vídeo, fui buscar a Global Data não pela questão de preços, ok? Fui buscar os OLED, que são os melhores monitores neste momento para gaming e para quem tiver um PC bom, ok? Porque para usar certas resoluções, e estamos a falar de 250, 240 e até acima de 360 Hz, não é para qualquer pessoa, certo? Portanto, peço desculpa, também não é para mim, porque eu não tenho gráfica para isto. Ok, mas há malta que tem, então eu vim falar nisto. Portanto, eu mostrei aqui alguns monitores que estavam disponíveis, tudo que está em stock, já sabem. Não se esquecer, são OLED, daí o preço, certo? Estamos a falar de resoluções acima dos 1440 e vai até aos 5K. Portanto, tem tudo. O mais baratinho é este de 439 e o mais caro é este de 1249. Isto aqui, porque nos vídeos que vimos ontem apareceu monitores mais caros. Tá bom? Então vamos continuar aqui pelos vídeos que estávamos ontem.
A 6K 165 Hz gaming monitor.
A Samsung falou de um já de 6K. 6K. Okay.
A 5K 165 Hz gaming monitor, a 1440p 600 Hz gaming monitor with a 1040 Hz dual mode.
Ontem também mostramos, vimos um monitor de 500 Hz e o mesmo monitor chega aos 1000 Hz, se quiserem jogar a 720p.
They've got a 3D monitor as well and a new OLED, all to look at CES 2026. I'm going to get some hands-on time with all these monitors, give you the specs, the breakdown, and also my first impressions of using them. Let's get into that after this. Thanks to MSI for sponsoring our CES coverage. Check out MSI's range of GeForce RTX 50 series graphics cards powered by NVIDIA Ada GPU architecture with advanced...
Esta é a publicidade. Vamos passar para a frente. Se quiserem.
Format that I haven't seen before. This is Samsung's brand new 6K gaming monitor, which is called the Odysee.
Portanto, 6K, ok? 330 Hz, ok? Se for a 3K, se for a 6K só vai dar 165 Hz. Ok, até vai ser inferior ao meu ao meu de 175. Samsung é sempre Samsung, certo? Eu acho que sinceramente, que eu digo, para ter 330 Hz, mesmo a 3K, vocês vão ter que ter uma boa placa gráfica, ou então só se tiverem a jogar Counter-Strike ou Fortnite.
HS 32-inch model. So, a couple of specs before we get started to my impressions of actually using it playing Cyberpunk, as you can see here. So this is a 32-inch panel, 6K resolution, 6144 by 3456 at 165 Hz. It also has dual mode, a 3K
32 polegadas, eu acho que a partir daqui gaming é à distância normal que a gente costuma estar de um monitor, acho que começa a ser um bocadito grande demais, ok? Acho que 27 até seria o indicado.
Dual mode, I believe, which takes you down to it takes you up to 330 Hz, but down in resolution. But the good news is that because this is such a high resolution panel, when you do go into that dual mode configuration at 3K, you're still getting quite a high resolution. So that's still going to look quite nice for gaming. It's not quite 4K, but it is higher than 1440p. And on a 32-inch panel, that still looks pretty good in my opinion. So 224 pixels per inch makes this one of the highest pixel density LCDs that we've seen so far. Probably should have mentioned this is an IPS LCD, of course. So yeah, they've got it running here with Cyberpunk 2077, and surprisingly, on this RTX 5080 system, it actually runs quite well, plays decently, and it is a very, very sharp resolution. So when I flicked back into the desktop and I was sort of playing around with the resolution that you could see, very sharp. Definitely sharper than what I'm used to seeing from for example, like a 4K 32-inch LCD monitor.
Esse sistema está ainda em chinês, não é? Portanto, há alguns que, como eu falei no outro vídeo atrás, daquilo que eles apresentaram, havia até monitores que só sairiam para mais de meio ano, agora 2026. Portanto, ainda estávamos em fase de desenvolvimento.
The question is more around gaming on this display. Now 6K is obviously great for productivity uses, great for desktop apps, but for gaming, I'm not sure whether it's going to provide much of an improvement over 4K, even at a 32-inch resolution. This configuration that they're using here, they've enabled DLSS, I think performance mode with the transformer model. It seems to run okay in terms of performance, but if you've got lower end hardware, 6K is going to be pretty unachievable, I would think, in a lot of configurations. So this is really for high-end gamers. But I believe the real idea behind this is meant for people with that dual use case. They do productivity and they do gaming. They want a high resolution 6K panel, I guess, for productivity uses, for maybe Photoshop, Premiere, that sort of thing, or other productivity tasks. And then they want to get in and play gaming. And this panel gives you kind of the best of both worlds. With previous productivity monitors at these high resolutions, they've been 60 Hertz or maybe 120 Hertz. 165 Hertz is better. And then also offering that 3K dual mode is going to open up a lot of other opportunities for people. And if performance is a problem at 6K, you can just chuck it in the 3K mode. So I don't have any pricing or release date information for this panel just yet, but I'm expecting it to come out at some point in the future. I believe it also has a matte screen coating, so if you're wondering about that, it is a matte panel. And yeah, let's go check out some more monitors. So we just looked at the G80HS, now we're looking at the G80HF. So this is
Trovo OLED, ok? Este é o de 27 polegadas também e 5K de resolução. Não é para qualquer pessoa.
LED difference means you're getting quite a different experience. But basically, as I said, 27-inch panel, 5120 by 2880 resolution, same 165 Hz refresh rate as the 6K model, but smaller and a similar pixel density. So this model, I believe, is around 218 pixels per inch. So the 6K model at 32 inches is 224 pixels per inch. So they should offer a similar sort of density experience, similar sort of text quality, but obviously they're matching the 5K resolution to the 27-inch panel and the 6K resolution to the 32-inch panel. This is also a dual mode display, so it takes you down to 1440p at 330 Hertz. So we saw a similar model to this from Acer the other day. So this is, I guess, the Samsung version of that. Is an IPS LCD, of course, and it comes with Samsung's latest features like HDR10+. I don't expect there to be like genuine real HDR hardware in here in terms of mini LED local dimming or things like that, but they are claiming support for that. It has got DisplayPort 2.1 and HDMI 2.1 in it as well. And I believe, though I'm not sure what sort of screen coating we're looking at, it's potentially matte, but I'll have to have a look at that a bit closer in a moment. Again, with these Samsung displays they've announced here at CES 2026, there's no pricing or release date information for any of these monitors, so we're just going to...
Pois, não porem os preços é que é bocado chunga.
But we did see that Acer monitor that's using a very similar panel to this. They were quoting $800 US for their version. So that's sort of setting the ballpark for what to expect for a 5K monitor. This is very much a new panel that we're seeing that will be coming out in 2026 and is bringing a new resolution for gaming. Now 5K is going to be very difficult to run, but the dual mode functionality at 1440p, that's a very decent resolution to run on a 27-inch panel. So that's still going to look very nice and does indeed look very nice on these panels. And you know, on top of that, it does have that productivity benefit as we talked about for the 32-inch 6K panel, just in a smaller panel format. So I think these are going to be highly attractive monitors for people that do want to use them for a wide variety of use cases. And the fact that the refresh rate at 165 Hz is very similar to today's 4K monitors means you aren't losing out too much in that. So if you were previously choosing 27-inch 4K and now you want to go up to 27-inch 5K, it's still 165 Hz. So it's still going to give you that great gaming refresh rate. So again, more monitors to check out, so let's get in and take a look at one of their OLEDs. Next up at Samsung, we've got the Odysee G80SH, not to be confused with the G80HS that we looked at previously. So the HS model, 6K, the SH model is a 32-inch QD OLED. So Samsung has been making 32-inch QD OLED gaming monitors for a while now with the 240 Hz refresh rate, all the usual QD OLED stuff. but this is using the newer generation of panel that is being debuting here for 2026. So the main benefits that we're getting compared to those previous QD OLEDs at 4K is the move up to display HDR True Black 500 specifications. That does give you slightly increased brightness. I believe the peak brightness spec has potentially increased to 1300 nits, but we're getting at least 300 nits for full screen brightness. So that is one of the main benefits. I believe Samsung have also introduced some new benefits to this monitor. DisplayPort 2.1 UHBR20, which wasn't included on their previous 32-inch 4K QD OLED monitors. So that will give you that DSC-free experience if you want to use it, similar to what we see from some of the other brands like MSI, Asus have got monitors that also give you that functionality. Samsung is still using their glare-free, aka matte coating on this monitor, which is kind of unique to Samsung's variant. So if you did want that specifically on your monitor, the Samsung model is once again going to be the option to get, whereas if you wanted a glossy, all the other brands are going to offer that for you. Now, this is going to be very similar to the Asus PG32 UCDM3 that they've also announced at CES 2026. So same next gen or current gen, new generation for 2026 QD OLED panel. I have got that Asus monitor into test. So once I get back from CES, I'll begin testing and reviewing that to see what this new panel will provide. And that is going to, I guess, give us a pretty good look at what Samsung will also be providing with this monitor. But once again, no pricing or release date information for this one, so we're not sure when that will be available. But yeah, at some point, all these new generation panels will be coming. But if you've seen our reviews of 4K QD OLEDs before, we kind of know what to expect. The design is very similar as well. Though what I'm seeing here is a plastic base for the finish here for the base. I believe the previous models were using a metal base, but they're still using that nice slim sort of gray, silverish sort of finish on the back. So I think it still looks quite nice from that standpoint. Yeah, a couple more monitors to check out. There's a 1440p 600 hertz monitor, so let's go take a look at that one. Another world first monitor here at CES 2026 for Samsung. We've got the Odysee G60H. This is a 27-inch 1440p IPS LCD, but up to 600 hertz in this version. It also has a 720p dual mode that takes you to 1040 hertz. So you would have seen the video from Acer, or hopefully you've seen the video that we looked at Acer, where they had a 500 hertz 1440p monitor.
Estes monitores, pena ele não mostrar o preço.
Samsung has
Para a
decided
gente não se assustar.
beat them just a little bit on both of those specs. Not 500 hertz, but 600 hertz, not 1000 hertz in the dual mode, but 1040 hertz. And of course, that extra 40 hertz is going to make all the difference between you winning or losing in your most popular esports games. So DisplayPort 2.1 and HDMI 2.1 on this monitor as well. It is HDR10 Plus capable. Again, I'm not expecting any genuine HDR hardware on this monitor. It's just going to offer you a basic.
Depois, quando tivermos aqui online estes monitores, pá, depois mostro.
At 600 hertz, 1440p, playing around, I was like, it looks okay, looks reasonable, but let's try turn it into that dual frame rate mode. Let's get the 1040 hertz up and running. Turned into the OSD menu, flipped it over into dual frame rate, was working at 1000 hertz, but then I couldn't get into the OSD menu anymore. I thought I'd broken the monitor. Turns out this is just a prototype version. So
Pois, é protótipo.
because they're showing off a prototype and probably not a final version, this could be a little further away than some of the other monitors that we've looked at, but basically there are still a few firmware tweaks.
Por isso é que isto é uma feira, não é?
Through here. So this model, the OSD menu doesn't work in the 1080p, in the 720p mode. They say that's going to be fully fixed, fully working for the final model. It also says 4K. We might show an OSD screenshot, for example. If you see 4K in the OSD, again, it's because it's a prototype firmware that we're seeing here today. So yeah, I mean, the 720p mode at 1040 hertz, that's going to be good in some titles. The resolution is a little problematic just because some games aren't designed with their UI elements to work super well at 720p. So often you do see it becoming quite blurry and difficult to read. Small text, for example, like this game here, it shows like stats and weapons in the corner here. And in the 1440p mode, you know, these aren't the highest resolution text elements. Like they're very readable, of course, but they're not the clearest. Now, if you turn that into the 720p mode, which I'm not going to do because it could break the monitor again, those become, you know, less clear, less readable. So you do need games that work well with that sort of resolution, which again isn't going to be all titles, but in the situations where it is possible to play nicely and you're sort of more focused on the actual game itself, it could provide clarity benefits. The other question mark that of course we have over these panels is them being IPS LCDs at very high refresh rates. So 600 hertz and 1000 hertz is pretty crazy for these monitors, and It's questionable how much the response times will be able to support that. We saw the Acer monitor previously when we flicked it over into the UFO test, that it was a little blurry in their configuration, so overdrive optimization is going to be really key for these monitors. Again, still in the prototype stages, they're probably still tweaking up those things. So, and this whole setup here is in Korean, so it's difficult to get into something like the UFO test. But yeah, this is going to be a really interesting monitor to test from all of those perspectives. We'll see how the response times go for supporting 600 and 1040 Hertz. We're going to see how the 720p mode goes for clarity and those sorts of things. But at least they're now giving people options of even higher refresh rates at 1440p for LCDs, which I guess is designed to be competitive with the latest, 500, 540 Hertz OLEDs. 1000 Hertz OLED is supposedly not too far away. 720 Hertz OLED is now a thing. So yeah, very interesting monitor, and there should be a couple of panels that use very similar specs to this. So we'll check that out soon. But let's go check out the final monitor from Samsung, which is a nice 3D display. All right, last monitor on show here at CES from Samsung is the Odysee 3D G90XH. So at the start of this video, you would have seen the 6K monitor that we looked at. This is a very similar version, but with 3D capability. So at the top of the monitor, if you have a look, maybe we'll get some B-roll, but there are a couple of eye tracking cameras that you sit in front of. It tracks your eyes and it implements glasses-free 3D tracking. Glasses-free 3D, bit of a tongue twister there. But I was testing it earlier and it works super well. So this is the second generation of this technology from Samsung. They had a 27-inch 4K version last year. Never got a chance to look at that version, but they're upgrading it this year to a 32-inch panel at a 6K resolution, but still with the same glasses-free 3D eye tracking version of the 3D technology. So I was playing it and I was super impressed with how it works. It actually, the 3D effect that you get with this monitor is very real, really impressed me. You get a lot of depth of items appearing like it's coming out of the screen. Now, the way that we're filming it at the moment, the angle and with the camera and everything, it's not...
Óculos, para quem quiser. Simuladores de voo, por exemplo, capaz de ser interessante.
Sort of lean back and sit too far away from the monitor at an angle, the 3D effect doesn't work. But if you're in the optimal zone, sitting in front of it, if you move your head, you tilt it around a bit, you start to see the in-game,
Agora, o facto de não termos os preços, pá,
even if you're sitting very still, it's
fico assim com o pé atrás.
data to your eyes and making it appear like objects are coming out of the screen or into the screen as well. So I've just gone and spoken to someone about how this panel works. So if you're interested in how it works, this is the explanation that I got. The screen has a specific 3D film applied to it, which splits part of the screen to be able to go to each of your eyes. So first of all, there's a bunch of little micro lenses and stuff all across the display, which effectively splits it so that part of the image can go to each of your eyes, and that gives you the 3D effect. The 3D cameras combine with this to track your eyes and manipulate the game as well through that lens to...
Quer dizer, podemos jogar isto sem ter que usar os óculos? Isso era brutal.
...had a film applied to it, but you were moving around slightly.
Isso era brutal.
Because you're not a 3D object, you can move and you get that 3D perspective effect. But with the combination of eye tracking, the micro lenses across the display, and the game integration that allows for the 3D support, you can actually manipulate the whole image, and that gives you the full 3D glasses effect. What that does do though, is it does reduce or halve the resolution of the display effectively while playing games. So while this is a 6K panel, you get effectively a 3K resolution within the games, because half...
Que estar a jogar com os óculos é muita chunga, meu.
Left eye, half of the pixels allocated to your right eye, so the game is effectively working at that lower resolution. I was also told that if you compare this 6K model running in the 2D mode to the other 6K model that does not support 3D, they will largely look the same, but not look entirely the same because of the lens coating that is applied to both models. So this really is designed for 3D gaming. If you're primarily thinking of 6K 2D gaming, the optimal experience will be with the other version. This version is a little glossier than the other one as well. The other version is matte. This is a glossy finish. But yeah,
não sei se este também está em fase de testes, vamos ver.
Combination of hardware, software, and eye tracking to provide that 3D effect, which I believe is similar to the model that was released last year. So the other specs here, of course, the 6K panel, 6144 by 3456 at 165 Hertz. Again, still got that 330 Hertz dual mode. It's an IPS LCD DisplayPort 2.1. Now, Samsung were telling me that currently they're supporting around 63 games with their 3D tech, including Hell Is Us, which is the game that they're showing here, Stellar Blade. Those are some of the popular titles. They're expecting to have support for 100 plus, or maybe around 120 games by the end of this year. It does also support 2D to 3D video upscaling. Now, I was told that upscaling doesn't work in games themselves, so it can't just take any game and make it into a 3D version, but for video, via the desktop software that they will provide, you will be able to turn things like YouTube videos from 2D to 3D via supposed AI upscaling. Now, of course, because it uses eye tracking and all that sort of thing, it does require desktop connections. It needs to be hooked up to your PC. You need to run the supported game. So it's not going to work with absolutely every title, but hopefully by the end of this year, we're seeing it's supported in quite a number of titles you might be playing. So yeah, it's one of those.
Muita atenção, se estão a comprar isso, a pensar nisto, 3D.
Over the years, I think about a decade ago, we got versions that required glasses that synced up to the display and stuff. It was a bit of a mess. It wasn't really an optimal gaming experience because of that. I don't really like the idea of using glasses, but the fact that you can just sit in front of this display, you don't need to even do any setup. Like people coming in and out of this display, just sitting down and you immediately can start playing. You don't need to train it onto your eyes or anything.
Isso será fantástico, não é? Mas, como dizem outros,
stand, it looks quite nice. This is meant to be Samsung's flagship gaming.
Samsung será sempre Samsung. Isso por mais que custe às pessoas admitirem.
Impressed me with how it works, but we're going to have to give it a full sort of review breakdown to see how well the 3D truly works across a range of games and scenarios, not just in this optimal setup that we get at the CES booth here. So,
pois, isso aí é que são outras histórias.
New gaming monitors that they've announced at CES 2026. While we were able to get specifications and hands-on time with a lot of these products, unfortunately...
apareceram primeiros monitores 6K, 5K, a Samsung tem muita coisa disso. Vamos ver.
This is G-Sync Pulsar, the best and clearest backlight strobing technology that I've used. NVIDIA is finally ready to launch G-Sync Pulsar at CES 2026, and I've already done some hands-on testing.
Essa é a nova tecnologia da NVIDIA. Ok, pá, vamos ver se isto vai ter pernas para andar, ok?
On a normal LCD, the backlight is lit at all times, but this creates clarity issues when objects move quickly across the screen. This is because LCDs are sample and hold monitors, which hold images on screen until the next update. During fast motion, your eyes end up tracking objects that aren't actually moving continuously, and this causes blur. Backlight strobing attempts to solve this by pulsing the backlight on and off. The backlight only briefly turns on when the image on screen has updated. The rest of the time it shows black. This hides most of the hold part of LCD operation and stops your eye tracking objects that aren't moving. Thanks to visual trickery and the magic of the brain, the flicker effect is hidden motion as if it's almost continuous with much less blur. This is what G-Sync Pulsar tech is built on, but NVIDIA have taken it multiple steps further. Traditional backlight strobing tech has a number of limitations. Firstly, it pulses the backlight at a fixed rate, so it doesn't work with variable refresh rates. Secondly, it pulses the entire screen at once, but due to LCD scan-out, the image isn't updated on screen all at once, so clarity with strobing enabled changes between the top and bottom of the screen. This has made backlight strobing a tech...
É uma das coisas que eu gosto aqui no nosso amigo, é que ele faz bastantes análises a monitores, muito bem detalhadas, tudo explicadinho, o que é importante, o que é que não é. Portanto, vocês, se quiserem depois ver, vejam o vídeo dele. Ele tem aqui um outro canal, que ele faz parte do World Unboxed, mas eles colocaram um que se chama Monitor Unboxed, ok? Vejam este subcanal, porque é muito interessante aquilo que ele fala aqui e as análises que ele faz aos monitores, ok? Aconselho-vos a ver, isto especialmente para quem está à procura de monitores, ok?
MSI have a brand new 5K gaming monitor which uses a glossy finish. It has a 2304 zone mini LED local dimming backlight.
A MSI também está com monitores, inclusive já em 2020, estamos a falar de 2026, em 2025 eles apresentaram os monitores que eu acho que deviam ser bloqueados automaticamente pelos fabricantes de software que traziam sistemas de cheatarem, se é que a gente pode dizer isso. Okay?
They've also got a G-Sync Pulsar monitor that we're going to look at. They've got another 5K monitor, and they've got some pretty interesting, well actually they've got a thing with some AI features that we're going to take a look at, as well as some new screen coatings for some of their productivity focused monitors. So let's go take a look at all of that.
Thanks to MSI for sponsoring our CES coverage. Check out MSI's range of GeForce RTX 50 series graphics cards powered by NVIDIA Ada GPU architecture with advanced ray...
Para a frente, é a publicidade deles, portanto se quiserem ver o vídeo.
PG272 QRF X36, and this should be available. In fact, it actually could be available by the time this video goes out. They're supposed to be launching, I think, in North America on January the 7th. So
Previsto para o lançamento foi em janeiro. Para ser em janeiro. 7 de janeiro, mas isto é América, não é? E vamos ver qual é o preço. Atenção, isto são monitores IPS, ok?
pretty soon. Now, if you're interested in G-Sync Pulsar, basically this is NVIDIA's new backlight strobing technology that also works with adaptive sync variable refresh rates.
Bem, então com a nova tecnologia, este monitor de 27 polegadas 1440p a 360 Hz, portanto, bom monitor.
We do have a full review of the G-Sync Pulsar tech already on the channel, so if you're interested to know how that particular panel works and everything, you can just check that out. We did test the ASUS model for that, but this is the exact same panel. So it's the same 1440p IPS LCD at up to 360 Hz with G-Sync Pulsar. So the exact same results that you would have seen from that ASUS monitor will also apply to this MSI. There's really no special or unique features to the MSI monitor. As far as I'm aware, all of this first wave of G-Sync Pulsar displays are basically the same. So it also includes, G-Sync ambient adaptive technology. It does work with HDR as well. And on MSI's model, they're offering DisplayPort 1.4a. They've also got HDMI 2.1. So again, like I mentioned in that G-Sync Pulsar video, even though this is using a G-Sync module, it's the new MediaTek solution, which does enable things like HDMI 2.1. And then we get some, USB stuff as well. So yeah, I'm not sure whether I'll be reviewing this monitor because I have already tested out Pulsar, and the main feature is, the new adaptive sync compatible backlight strobing, but MSI also have an option that's available for people. This is the MSI monitor that I was most excited to come and check out at CES 2026. It is the MPG 271K RAW 16. So they've started to use so many
Os nomes deles.
so we're getting actual words in the middle there, which maybe makes my job a little bit easier. Anyway, this is a 5K dual mode monitor, so 27-inch IPS LCD at 5K, and we've seen a few of these at CES so far from other brands like Samsung, Acer, Asus as well. But the unique thing about this version is that it comes with a 2304 zone mini LED local dimming backlight. So unlike all those other models, this one is going to have proper HDR support. So with 2304 zones, we're also going to get about double the number of local dimming zones compared to previous 27-inch LCDs that we looked at last year, the 4K models that also supported things like dual mode. So that should hopefully tighten up the contrast a little bit. IPS isn't the best technology in terms of tight contrast for HDR, so increasing the number of zones will provide a tangible benefit on this panel technology. Also, what we're seeing here is a glossy finish. So the Acer model has a glossy finish as well, but this will of course be the first one that's glossy and also has the mini LED backlight. I think I will end up preferring glossy. Now, of course, we'll have to test these products fully to come to those conclusions, but I think when you're talking about an HDR capable product, that glossy makes the most sense. So this is not a film that needs to be pulled off. This is the final production version, will be glossy. So other specs of interest, of course, 5K.
Monitores da MSI têm bom aspecto.
Up to 1440p, 330 Hz. So this is kind of providing the best of both worlds. You can use 5K for sort of your desktop applications, creative workflows, pro apps, and then switch it over to 1440p, which is going to be much easier to run on your GPU. That's still a very good resolution for 27-inch panels, though we will have to see how the display scaling goes when we test it. But 330 Hz is very competitive along with, modern monitors of this sort of size and refresh rate. So we've also got DisplayPort 2.1 UHBR 13.5, and it is VESA certified to
5K, não esqueçam, ok? 27 polegadas.
at least 1400 nits of peak brightness. And usually with the display HDR 1400, it's going to be producing quite a bit more than 1400 nits. That's certainly what we saw with last year's models. The interesting thing that I was told when speaking to MSI employees about this product is that it isn't confirmed to be released. So they think that if they do release it, it will be priced around $900 US. So that is a little bit more expensive.
$900.
Between $700 and $800 for I think some of those other models. So it's only going to be a little bit more to get the mini LED backlight. But MSI don't have a firm release date for this. They are, what they tell me, assessing the market to see whether they want to release this product.
Estão a ver se a malta quer gastar dinheiro, não?
This seems like a really high quality and good monitor to release. You're talking about a 5K resolution, mini LED backlight with more zones than we've seen from the 4K models last year. It seems like a really capable panel. So the idea that they potentially won't be releasing this seems, really crazy to me. So I hope MSI does
O mercado está complicado.
to release this because I want to test it, I want to use it. So we'll see how that goes in the future, but let's check out some more monitors. When I was looking through MSI's CES monitor announcements, this is the product that came up as the most strange to me. So this is again a 5K monitor, as we've seen a lot of at CES, but the default refresh rate is only 75 Hertz on this model. And what they're doing is still using dual mode to be able to get it up to 1440p 300 Hertz. They're calling that quad boost for this particular model. It's also got a matte finish instead of glossy like we saw in the previous
5K faz 75 Hz só?
So the HDR spec is down at display HDR 400, so it's not really an HDR monitor. So I thought, you know, that's a little unusual. 75 Hertz is quite a low refresh rate for a modern display. I tend to think of 120 Hertz as being the minimum these days. So that was quite unusual. So I thought, why are they making this monitor? So speaking to people at the MSI booth, they told me that when this monitor is released, it will be priced at just $500 US. So that will make it the cheapest 5K monitor that we've seen here at the show. I think the minimum we
À volta de $500,
to $700 US.
preço mesmo muito baixo.
5 Hertz or $500, that will be an option. It is still going to be okay for gaming purely through dual mode, so the 300 Hertz support is going to be, I guess, the gaming mode, but I do have question marks over the 5K implementation. For creators, you don't necessarily need
Só venda.
refresh rate, but I still would like more of a refresh rate, so yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that one goes. Not sure whether I'll be testing this, but it is an option if you want 5K at a low refresh rate, but still with that dual mode functionality for some form of gaming at times. So let's move on and take a look at the Meg X. So one of MSI's new monitors here at CES is the Meg X, and I'm not talking about another Jason Statham action film here, I'm talking about MSI's new ultra-wide gaming monitor. And what is surprising to me is that I've told you the full product name, the MSI Meg X or MEG-X. No
Esse já é OLED.
numbers salad. How nice is that? Very refreshing to see MSI just calling a monitor Meg X. Amazing, easy to remember, very memorable. And I guess that makes sense because this is
É.
MSI's flag.
Acho que realmente é espantoso.
Uses the same 360-inch V-Stripe 3440 by 1440 panel as we've already tested in the monitor that's behind this, the 341 CQR. So this
Este é aquele curvo, olhar.
version of that. The panel itself is exactly the same, so we're not seeing higher refresh rate or increased brightness or anything like that. It should largely give you the same experience, same glossy coating and everything like that. However, they're introducing AI features. So a couple of years ago at Computation,
Pois.
we saw MSI
Ah,
go with
isto é que eu vou. Já falei da outra vez. Acho que as empresas que desenvolvem jogos têm que estar muito atento ao que está. Estes gajos estão a querer pôr nos monitores. Que basicamente isto é cheatar e os sistemas de anti-cheating não vão detectar estas faculdades, ok? Muita atenção a isso. Sou rigorosamente contra isto. Já falei o outro ano por causa disto.
AI thing with monitors. I'd sort of described it as cheating features, and some of those cheating features were pretty egregious. They had a mode that would, like, I think, hook into like League of Legends or one of those games, and it could see through fog, highlight enemies, pretty crazy levels of cheating that would have been possible on that monitor. I think MSI either never released that monitor or toned down those AI features significantly in the final release. And we're seeing similar here with this monitor. So none of those crazy, super over-the-top cheating features are available, no seeing through the fog type stuff. But I've been told that some of the things that this monitor will be able to do is reduce the brightness of flashbangs and sort of adjust the contrast and brightness when it detects flashbangs. It will be able to find models on screen, so certain characters and things like that, and raise the brightness of them, make them a little bit more visible. It'll also be able to zoom in on an enemy if it sees them. It should be able to raise blacks in dark scenes. So previously we had dark boosting, shadow boosting, that's a
Bem aí,
today.
campo muito complexo.
Of course, widespread now, but you'll be able to do that in a more dynamic nature on the Meg X, so it'll only boost the black levels in some areas as opposed to the entire screen like you see on those other modes. And I think you can also talk to this monitor, something that maybe will be good for me because all of my friends these days are monitors, so you know, having someone to talk to would be nice from time to time. Down the bottom here we do have an RGB LED light strip, which I think is much better integrated into this monitor than we saw from the previous times that MSI used a light strip. On the last generation model, which was several years ago now, they implemented this really thick and ugly chin along the bottom, but I think this is a much more sleek and stylish implementation. And then you get the AI care sensor at the bottom there, which detects your presence and does all of that stuff. So the LED light bar does hook into the AI features and stuff like that, or supposed AI features, to show you things like your health in a game, your ammo count. You can do all of that with that sort of feature. The AI features that we've been talking about, you don't actually need to hook into your PC to run those. There is an NPU processor inside the monitor. It runs all of that on the device itself. So yeah, the previous implementation, like I talked about at Computex a few years ago, that required game integration, all sorts of crazy stuff. On this monitor, yeah, you don't need to do that. It is funny to see them, recommending single-player gaming or practice modes for some of those more cheating-oriented AI features, but
É,
that's kind of the way
bem,
Minhas is going. We've already got
quer dizer, põe os sistemas para as maltas fazerem cheating e depois recomendem para jogar em single player, portanto, normalmente a pessoa, ou em modo jogos de tipo demo. Então, porque é que vejam o dinheiro que eles gastam naquela coisa e agora para tentar fugir, que isto apenas é tentar fugir às questões legais que as empresas de software deviam meter estes gajos em tribunal. Ok? É tão simples como isso. Por mais que custe as pessoas entenderem. Então, quer dizer, essas empresas já andam a colocar, aquelas empresas fazem aqueles comandos, não vou dizer os nomes para as pessoas não fazerem pesquisas, software que faz shit e agora o hardware está a aplicar coisas que não podem ser depois detectadas. Epá, é complicado.
And now we're getting a few more advanced things here. But yeah, we'll check that out a bit later. We'll see whether we're going to review this. Not sure whether I will, because we've already checked out the previous model, but this will be the flagship version. One thing to mention at the end here is that I don't believe there is a firm price or release date for this model just yet. It will be more expensive than the other model that doesn't have the AI features. That one is $1,099 US, so expect this one to be higher than that. But yeah, we'll have to check back in on pricing when.
Vai ser barato, vai.
So the other day I was at the Samsung display booth. Samsung Display is a panel manufacturer, and we saw this technology in more of a demo, but here we actually have a final version of the monitor that is using this tech. So what we're looking at here is the Pro Max 271 UPX-W12G, bit of a mouthful of a name there. But what makes this monitor unique, at least in my opinion, MSI probably thinks there's a few other more interesting features, but so this is the new anti-glare low reflection coating, or AGLR coating. So for 2026 Samsung QD-OLED displays, they're offering two versions across their entire lineup. There's the standard glossy that you would have seen previously. So this is a 27-inch 4K QD-OLED. Previously you would have seen plenty of glossy versions of that panel. Now they're also offering people, well, the OEMs, the option to use the AGLR coating across their lineup. So this is one of those monitors that we're seeing here. What that means is, of course, it's a matte finish instead of glossy, which is more ideal, in my opinion, for a pro monitor where you need to guarantee, no distracting reflections and things like that in brighter environments. But it also introduces some of the benefits that we're seeing on the new glossy QD-OLED ultrawide, for example. They're also deploying 32-inch models. So this also has MSI's dark armor technology, so that improves black levels in those brighter ambient environments. It also has the screen hardness improvements from 2H to 3H. Those are deployed here, but on a 27-inch monitor. So far we've only seen the 32-inch and the 34-inch ultrawides using those on glossy panels, but those will also be available in the matte version here. So that's one of the unique things. Apart from that, we do get a 120 Hz refresh rate. We do also get something that is called the M color mode for MacBooks and also Apple devices. So the idea here is that it is a special color profile that's built into this monitor that is designed to mimic the colors that you would see on a MacBook or iPad display. So I believe
por isso que eu gostei da cor. A cor está muito porreira.
you also get with some of Apple's displays, the full color calibration that sort of matches the two displays between the two different panels. That will be available for people that use Apple devices in their workflows, which I think is pretty neat because it can be a little difficult to calibrate those two displays to have the same sort of performance. MSI is providing that out of the box. You just have to switch over into the M profile and it will give you the same color performance. It's a 120 Hz screen. That should be okay for a lot of productivity use cases. I probably would still prefer to see it at 240 Hz just because I use a 240 Hz monitor for productivity and I think it's great, but 120 Hz is certainly the minimum that is acceptable. It also has a 3-device KVM switch, and that is enabled because there are 2 USB Type-C inputs. So a lot of gaming monitors these days have your 2-device KVMs, one via the USB hub, the other via USB-C, so you can use one display, keyboard and mouse with multiple devices. With this monitor, you'll be able to hook up to 3 devices. So for some reason, if you're someone that has a desktop PC, another desktop PC, and then a third desktop PC, you'll be able to use all of those at once with this monitor, which is kind of neat. So let's check out one of MSI's other Pro Max monitors in just a moment. This monitor is using another screen coding technology that I haven't seen before, which MSI calls Eyes Ergo Plus, aka a circular polarizing filter. So this is the Pro Max 271QP-HWE14.
Tem 27 polegadas.
LCD at 1440p, 144 Hz. So that's pretty decent for creator workloads. However, the circular polarizing filter is something that I haven't experienced before. And I was told about this technology from panel manufacturers last year as an option for both these sort of pro/office PCs, but also gaming monitors. I think AOC is releasing a gaming monitor that's using a circular polarizing filter. But the idea here, or at least the claims behind this technology, is that it reduces eye strain compared to linear polarizing filters. So I don't quite know the explicit way, like the orientation of how it actually looks under a microscope, or if you look very closely what it looks like, it's some sort of difference in the polarizing layout. But the circular polarizer is designed to, instead of making all of the light rays coming out in a sort of uniform layout, the circular
Este é mais monitor de escritório.
the panel, which is supposed to improve the eye strain, or at least reduce the eye strain. Now, I sort of stared into this for a few seconds or a few minutes earlier, and I didn't get any eye strain, so that's a good sign. But I think you'll probably need to test this for many, many hours on end to see how well the circular polarizing filter actually works. But I thought that was pretty neat because it's supposed to be a technology that improves that potential problem for people. And we do hear from people that have eye strain for various different reasons across monitors. So flickering is a big one. If you have monitors with a flickering backlight, which can be an issue on some mini LED monitors, OLEDs as well do have a slight flicker. And we've heard from people that are sensitive to that. It causes them headaches and eye strain issues like that. And then the polarizing part of monitors can cause eye strain for people. So the fact that they've sort of developed this new circular polarizing technology should help for people that are affected by that. So that's
Uma coisa que estou a achar bastante boa é que quase todas as marcas estão a focar em monitores de 27 polegadas para cima. Um bocado tendência do mercado.
Inside that case are some components, and this all goes together into a pre-built system which is called the MEG Vision X AI. So the screen on the front here, I think it's a 13.3-inch 1080p LCD, which provides you, well, it's actually a touchscreen as well. It provides you a look at all of your stats inside your PC. And I guess this is becoming a trend that we're seeing across some pre-builts and cases and things like that. The nice large screen on the front. This is quite a wide screen, so you get quite a lot of accessibility to view all your stats. And I don't want to mess around with this because at the Samsung booth the other day, I did touch some things and started to break some stuff. So I thought I'll just leave it alone. But I am told.
É melhor não mexeres.
Now, what you get with the MEG Vision X AI inside of things, well, it's a high-end system, hence having a screen, because, of course, high-end systems have to have lots of screens. So inside you get up to Core Ultra 9 processors. I think inside this one they've got an RTX 5090, and so it goes up to a 5090. I think it starts at a 5070. And one of the unique things you might see with this case in particular is there's this extra part over the side here. That is part of MSI's Silent Storm cooling AI solution. So it's a dual chamber setup. Inside here you've got all of the components, the CPU and GPU, and then over here you've got things like the power supply. It just separates that out so you don't get the power supply heat affecting your components. So that's designed to be a bit of a better solution for cooling. It does also use MSI's Project Zero, so the backside power connectors and things like that. Looks a bit cleaner in there. I'm sure Balin will get some nice B-roll of that, but it looks really nice inside, a nice high-end system for people. And this will be available at a lot of retailers and stuff like that. And if you do want a nice large screen, which is certainly something I would want on my PC, that is available with the Vision X AI. Look at what else I found here at the MSI booth. Right inside this pre-built system, I reckon there's between $1 and $2 million worth of memory inside this particular build from G-Skill. So what we're looking at here is one of MSI's new Pro Max builds. So if you go over and have a look at the hardware.
Vamos passar para a frente porque isto é, vamos falar deste computador deles, não é este o interesse do vídeo.
Have some very exciting
Para LG,
Here at CES 2026, including a brand new 39-inch ultra-wide panel format. I've been waiting a long time for a 39-inch 5120 by 2160 panel to use on my personal gaming setup, and I think this monitor that we're about to see is going to make that cut. We've also got a 27-inch 5K model with mini LED local dimming. There's a 52-inch model which runs at something like 240 Hz 5120 by 2160 as well. It's a massive monitor that we're going to check out in just a moment, so let's get into it.
Thanks to MSI for sponsoring our CES coverage. Check out MSI's range of GeForce RTX 50 series graphics cards powered by NVIDIA Ada GPU architecture with advanced ray tracing.
É a publicidade deles. Portanto, se quiserem ver o vídeo.
Come and see at CES 2026, especially from LG. So it is the 39GX950B.
39 polegadas.
Personal gaming monitor, because I believe this is one of the best monitor sizes and monitor formats for gaming, especially with the new advancements that they've put into this panel. So what we're looking at here is a 39-inch ultra-wide at 5120 by 2160 using a WOLED panel, 165 Hz refresh rate, and also has dual mode support, so drops down the resolution to, I believe it's 2560 by 1080 at 330 Hz. So I personally use a 34-inch ultra-wide for gaming at 3440 by 1440, but I'd prefer a slightly larger size. So the 34-inch models typically are similar to a 27-inch monitor in terms of its vertical height, but obviously you get the additional width. With the 39-inch models, they're equivalent to a 32-inch monitor in vertical height, but obviously with additional width. The problem with this size previously, especially with OLEDs, has been the lower resolution.
Este monitor é enorme. Porra. Para trabalhar deve ser impressionante. Com vídeo.
Or recommend 2560 by 1440 at 32 inches, so having that in an ultra-wide sort of panel format doesn't make a lot of sense. But now that we're getting 5120 by 2160, that is a huge upgrade and increases the pixel density to 142 ppi, the same as we see from 32-inch 4K WOLEDs and QD OLEDs. So that's really good to see. This is also a new tandem WOLED panel, so it's going to have all the same benefits as we're seeing and have tested from, say, the 1440p models last year from LG and so forth. Still uses the RGWB sub-pixel layout, so it's not the new RGB stripe from the 27-inch 4K monitor that we saw at ASUS, but RGWB is still pretty decent, especially at this sort of resolution. We're talking, as I said, 4K type resolution, very, very nice. True Black 500 spec, so that means we're going to see at least 300 nits of full screen brightness, and we're also getting DisplayPort 2.1 UHBR20. So the demo that they're showing on this monitor is AI upscaling, so that's a feature that will be available on the 39GX950B and a couple of their other monitors here. So it actually seems to work quite well. They're feeding in a 1080p type image into the screen, and it's being upscaled to the full 4K/5K resolution. The left is the not upscaled image, the right is the upscaled image, and as we sort of pan around, it does look...
Estes exemplos é bocado complicado, tinha que se ver mesmo.
On the monitor itself, it doesn't require a PC connection or anything, but there's no smart TV functionality. So they're not running a full TV processor, just your standard monitor OSD, which is great for gaming, but you can just choose to enable AI upscaling if you want to with lower resolution sources. So that's available across several of their displays. Unfortunately, it means we can't get a great look at the resolution on this panel natively, but yeah, let's move on. One of the issues that we saw previously with LG displays, ultra-wide panels, and also LG Electronics, of course, that made them was the use of an 800R screen curvature. But they've changed that with this panel to be 1500R, which is going to be much more pleasant to use. LG Display the other day told us that this panel will be manufactured in both matte and glossy coatings. We're seeing the matte version here, and I believe LG Electronics will use matte for the final version. I'd probably prefer to see glossy, but at the very least, getting this panel format in any format is going to be really, really nice. So I'm super keen to check this one out and review it later. I don't have firm release date and pricing just yet. I believe it's coming out maybe a couple of months, but yeah, this could be my very next gaming monitor, my personal gaming monitor, so yeah, super keen. So here we have the LG 27GM950B. LG are also doing a 5K
Este é de 27 polegadas.
5K at 165 Hz, dual mode with 1440p. This is also a local dimming version of this monitor. So previously you might have seen our video at the MSI booth, where MSI are also doing a 2304 zone mini LED version.
Pá, de 27 para 39 é uma diferença brutal.
Screen coating, but this one is matte, so
Tamanho.
two different choices depending on your usage environments. I think the glossy version might be better. Will depend on the HDR scenarios and also what you're going to be ending up using it for. So I've been told that this monitor uses something special or unique called zero optical distance mini LED dimming. So essentially this is designed to minimize the gap between the LEDs and the liquid crystal layer. So at least LG says that this should be minimizing blooming, giving you a nicer quality image. It's pretty hard to see how that will work in this demo that they're running here. They're just running through some video files and that sort of thing. It will take a very specific type of content to show that effect, but hopefully we'll be able to get this panel in and fully test it. But at least it sounds interesting, because with IPS LCDs, like this panel is, there can be issues with blooming with local dimming technology, so anything that can be done to minimize that will be pretty handy. This is a Display HDR 1000 certified panel with a maximum brightness of 1250 nits.
É, mais para trabalho.
Was Display HDR 1400, so they may have a brightness
Para
advantage.
trabalho, vamos passar à frente, porque não é o nosso locação aqui, né?
Is absolutely enormous. We're looking at the 52G930B. This is a
Ei, ficaram 52 polegadas.
It has a 5120 by 2160 resolution at up to 240 hertz. Now it's not an OLED panel like the last two that we were looking at. This does appear to use I think they actually say here, a VA LCD panel. So yeah, it says VA 5K 2K. So yeah, that means of course VA LCD. It does also have a 1000 R curvature, so it's extremely curved. You're going to need to sit in the optimal position away from it to get the best experience. But this is one of the largest monitors I've certainly seen, so yeah, it's really going to fill up that space. Now 5120 by 2160 at a 52-inch size is a pretty...
Talvez para ver vídeos, filmes.
So we're obviously used to that across a lot of different monitors. This is just giving you more of that pixel density, but in a much larger panel format. So it could be great for things like flight simulators, racing simulators, where you want a huge panel, or alternatively, you just want to enjoy some single or multiplayer gaming on this sort of thing. So what else is there to say about this? Well, it's VESA Display HDR 600 certified, so I'm not expecting any significant levels of local dimming, especially because they've advertised local dimming for that previous model, but not for this model. So potentially just your edge lit configuration. So not sure what to make of that, especially if it's a high-priced product. I would expect this to be quite expensive, but all the products that we've seen here at LG today...
Pois, nem quer saber o preço disto.
I think with some of the OLEDs, they're expected around the second quarter of this year, maybe like the April, May timeframe. Not 100% sure on that, but yeah, no pricing for this. But if it is expensive without local dimming, we'll see how that goes. Now, it also has DisplayPort 2.1 UHBR20 and has a matte finish as well. So all of LG Electronics' products here are using a matte finish. Seems fine for this sort of product, especially because it's a VA LCD. And you probably won't want too many distracting reflections because it's so large that a lot of light sources are going to be interacting with this in your room. So I always like to see new panel formats and new interesting things. I think for my personal setup, earlier I was talking about the 39-inch and how that's probably going to become my next gaming monitor in terms of panel format. This is probably a bit too large for my setup. I'd need even more space. You really need to be invested in a huge gaming setup for something like this. So yeah. How that goes. Hopefully we'll be able to test it in the coming months once it's available, but it's huge. It's very impressive from that standpoint. Lastly, here we're looking at the LG 27GX 790B, not because this is a new monitor for CES, it was announced and released, I believe, towards the end of last year. This is, of course, their 1440p 540Hz WOLED with dual mode, so 720p 720Hz. The reason why I want to talk about this briefly is that LG were discussing that there will be, at least in the near future, a 1000Hz version, so they'll be bumping up the dual mode to 720p 1000Hz, which will really compete with some of those LCDs that we've seen here at the show. We've seen some 1440p dual modes with 1000Hz in their 720p mode on LCDs. I think Acer and Samsung had those. LG want to compete on the OLED front as well with the 1000Hz version at some point. So not sure the timeline on that sort of thing. Hopefully we'll see it at some point in 2026. Of course, for this version of the panel, it's a matte finish and all that sort of thing. We've already tested the ASUS PG27AQ WP. So if you want to have a look at how 540Hz WOLED with the new tandem...
São enormes, fogo.
720p, 720Hz dual mode. We have testing of that available on the channel already. So check that out if you're interested. But yeah, 1000Hz is coming at some point in the near future. All right, that does it for LG Electronics at CES 2026.
Ok, destes também já está.
Kit Grooves here at CES 2026, and we're in the rather crowded ASRock booth. A lot of interest in the products because there's a lot of stuff coming through. We're starting with a brand new monitor, the TCO 27 USAW. This is a 5th gen, we're told 5th gen QD OLED. So this will be a Samsung panel, which has the darker than dark darks because the front panel's actually got a texture pushed into it, and you can see by the lack of reflection as your roving reporter roves around the screen. But it's a fairly high spec. You're talking 4K 240 Hz with a 0.03 grey to grey. So that's one thing they're showing. They're also showing off a full range of small form factor and NUC systems, but specifically the Desk Slim X600 and B760, which is obviously the...
Eu acho que em Portugal monitores ASRock é muito complicado ver, pelo menos aqui no nosso mercado em cima do norte.
AMD and Intel variants, and what they're showing is that you can create quite a super little computer with plenty of memory in the back. You've got 4 DIMM sockets, and you've got space to put a small AI-focused graphic card, and apparently this will work fine and keep core temperatures low, even if you're using an Intel stock cooler. These things are shipped as bare bones, and we expect a European price around 250 euros. ASRock's now got a full range of power supplies. They've had the 1650 out now for quite a while. This is a high-end power supply that originally came out last year.
Vamos passar à frente.
Interesting maybe is the PG1000 PSF. This is a small form factor power supply.
Como eu falei da outra vez, a moda que está a pegar agora é isto. Isto vai encarecer para caralho os IOs.
Quite cool. I don't know how much time you spend looking at.
Não é para...
To decide which one gets the winning vote. This is pretty cool. I don't know for manufacturing. You've got a couple of brand new ranges coming through.
Boards das jogos estão a ficar muito estéticas.
Rock products here, which will form a new almost. Above that, they'll have the Challenger series, and the Challenger series will have slightly more features in 2026. So you can rock
Para quem não sabe, a minha board é a Mazrock, mas não é desta linha mais barata.
And the Challenger 850M.
Ok.
Into your DDR5
As boards são muito bonitas, pá.
slots. So if I had to guess, we'd say that the ROC products are probably going to come in around about £80,
Muito bonitas as boards. Oh.
dollars, euros. We know those things are good. It's holding another brand new motherboard, which has some very interesting innovation. They've decided
Esta board é um bocado diferente. Vejam, olhem bem para ela.
the DDR4 are not over, so they've now created a board which blends DDR4 and DDR5 slots.
Esta é uma board com misturas de DDR4 e DDR5.
So if you run out of memory and you can't go to the store, maybe just pull some DIMMs out of your old system.
Ok, portanto tem muita coisa ali para ver. Pronto, foi a parte final da questão dos monitores para gaming, monitores um bocado fora do mercado, certo? Mas é para mostrar que há espectro para tudo, está bem? O outro já está colocado online, portanto, vocês quiserem ir ver, estejam à vontade, tá bom? Muito obrigado, continuação e até uma próxima. Fui.